My wife won $9 million, filed for divorce, and kicked me out, but she forgot the prenup her parents forced me to sign before marriage. My wife won a $9 million lottery, filed for divorce, and kicked me out, but she forgot about the prenup that her parents compelled me to sign before our marriage. I am from a humble family. My parents live in a quiet suburb, and I grew up in a little 3-bedroom house that always smelled like fresh laundry and homemade food. After high school, I worked a variety of odd jobs, including bartending, helping at my uncle's hardware store, and eventually managing a local sporting goods store. It was not glamorous, but it was genuine. My wife, on the other hand, came from a world that I had never known. Her parents owned several properties, drove expensive automobiles, and threw enormous, extravagant parties a few times every year. Let's name my father-in-law Phil, and my mother-in-law Maëlle. Maëlle was a tall, imposing figure who exudes quiet power in every setting. He'd make casual comments that seemed more like disguised threats or manipulations. Maëlle was also good at gently expressing disapproval. Just one raised eyebrow could make others shrink. They were never blatantly nasty in front of me, but I could always sense their displeasure behind the polite talk. After my wife and I got engaged, I learned how much her parents feared that outsiders would take their family assets. They treated me like an intruder, despite the fact that my wife and I had been dating for years. Before we could set a wedding date, Phil insisted that I sign a prenuptial agreement. I didn't have the money to fight it legally, and I was too consumed by love. I kept telling myself it was a symbolic gesture to placate her parents. Isn't love the only promise I needed? The day I signed is very clear in my mind. It was a warm afternoon in her parents' huge house. Mel spread down the document and slipped a pen in my direction. He gave me coffee, almost as if it were a regular business transaction. My wife stood to the side and said little. That hurt, but I dismissed it, assuming it wouldn't matter in the long term. The contract stated that any gifts, inheritances, or trust funds from her family remained her own property. However, any big item we acquired together, such as a house or lottery winnings, would be marital property. That seemed unusual to me, but all I wanted was to marry her. 6 months later, we married in a beautiful lakeside wedding. My parents were overwhelmed by the luxury yet remained supportive. My father's expression was tense as he greeted my in-laws. He'd always taught me to trust my instincts, but I assumed love would remove any doubts. The first several years passed without any noteworthy incidents. We resided in a condominium that her parents helped us get. I made monthly payments on the mortgage, despite the fact that the down payment came from her father's gift. Looking back, it was never actually a gift, but rather a tool for controlling us. But back then, I assumed that this was how wealthy families operated. Our marriage had the normal money squabbles and occasional outbursts about our parents interfering with our decisions. They'd arrive unexpectedly, bring new furniture or decor, and occasionally reorganize our entire living space without notice. My wife would dismiss my frustration, blaming it on her parents' supportive nature. Then came the day that everything flipped upside down. My wife called me, ecstatic, to tell me she had won a $9 million lottery prize with a random ticket she purchased at a petrol station. At first, I was overjoyed, fantasizing about quitting our jobs and exploring the world, but my excitement gradually faded. She insisted we keep it a secret, even from my parents. She got strangely paranoid, talking about claiming the money correctly and meeting with lawyers I'd never met before. When I asked to attend these meetings, she told me I'd be out of place, which stung. I had no idea the main surprise was about to occur. One afternoon, I returned home from work fatigued to discover her searching through drawers with her aunt. She casually announced that she was filing for divorce and instructed me to pack my bags and leave the apartment, which she claimed was under her name. I was floored. Sure, I paid monthly mortgage payments, but she clearly thought her father's original down payment and her newfound wealth rendered me useless. I felt my heart break. I contacted my father, my voice cracking, and told him I had just been booted out of my own home. It was the ultimate treachery. The biggest shock came next. I learned that my father-in-law had sent his personal attorney to protect her. They wanted me out so they could keep the lotto earnings separate from me. Except they'd forgotten the provisions of the prenuptial agreement they'd forced on me. Instead of completely protecting their daughter, it declared that any windfall obtained during marriage counted as a shared asset. I then understood that if they insisted on divorce me immediately after winning the jackpot, they might not be able to keep anything. I decided to go cautiously. My father advised me to remain calm, hire a lawyer outside their social circle, and prepare for a nasty struggle. I was determined not to fold. They'd thrown down the gauntlet, treating me like a disposable annoyance. If they believed I'd walk away peacefully, they were greatly mistaken. I spent a few nights at my folks' house, attempting to process the shock. My mother was furious, shouting about how rude my in-laws had been from the beginning. My father, while also outraged, remained pragmatic. He contacted an old buddy, a family law attorney, and scheduled an appointment for me first thing in the morning. Sitting in that attorney's office, I felt a mixture of rage and relief. I told him about how my in-laws insisted on the prenup, how my wife had earned $9 million, and how she then surprised me with divorce. He chuckled as he reviewed the prenuptial agreement. They shot themselves in the foot, he told me. They specifically included language that lumps lottery winnings under marital assets. Unless a judge does some wild legal interpretation, you're entitled to a substantial portion. This was a lifeline for me. I was scared the prenup would keep me out, but it turned out that their fear of me claiming inherited wealth outweighed the potential of a jackpot scenario. My lawyer cautioned that it would not be simple. My in-laws were wealthy, well-connected, and likely to deploy a large legal team, but he believed we had a good case, especially given I had contributed financially to the marriage and had been unceremoniously evicted from our shared residence. I inquired about the divorce proceedings in our state. A disputed divorce can last months or longer, but if my wife's side realizes they are on shaky ground, they may seek an early settlement. The lawyer warned that they would use intimidation or underhanded tactics to persuade me to give away my rights cheaply. Within a few days, my father-in-law left me a frightening message, asking me to back off since I deserved nothing from his daughter. He claimed that if I sought to collect the lottery prizes, he would ensure that I received nothing. My lawyer just instructed me to document everything. Then, my mother-in-law cornered me outside my parents' house, suggesting a pathetic, silent exit. She portrayed it as a fantastic bargain, but it wasn't even enough to cover half of my mortgage payments. I declined, stating we'd see each other in court. She scoffed, perplexed by my refusal, obviously unaccustomed to anyone refusing her money. With negotiations at a deadlock, my lawyer filed petitions to prevent the lottery monies from being hidden or moved. That incensed my in-laws, who began spreading rumors about me being a gold digger who preyed on their young daughter. It stung, but I remained strong. My supervisor, who owned the sports goods store, had my back, dismissing my father-in-law's attempts to interfere with my employment. Friends took sides, some calling me petty, while others praised me for fighting back. The stress was unbearable, but I refused to succumb. We finally got a court date after several weeks of unsuccessful negotiations. My wife was not to be found. Personally, she was practically under her parents' protective wing, avoiding any direct communication with me. She let her lawyers do the talking, alleging I was a leech who gave nothing to the marriage. My lawyer objected, citing financial records, bill time sharing, and a specific prenuptial clause regarding windfalls. We also discussed how I had been violently kicked out of the condo. The judge directed both parties to prepare for a more formal hearing on asset partition. In one final attempt at intimidation, my father-in-law threatened my employer again, who swiftly instructed him to leave. That simply made my father-in-law angrier. My lawyer advised us to proceed carefully, but he was certain that a judge would see through their scare tactics. Nothing could have prepared me for the ultimate fight in court, but I knew the law was on my side, paradoxically, because to the very prenup they'd imposed on me. Weeks passed, and the anticipation for the approaching hearing reached fever pitch. My wife still avoided direct contact with me, but her lawyers inundated me with motions. They maintained that the lottery gain was separate property because she purchased the ticket, despite the fact that the prenup stated that any large windfall during marriage was marital. Meanwhile, my father-in-law attempted to ruin my reputation among friends and business acquaintances by spreading the myth that I was a gold digger who had married into the family purely for money. During this time, I had a combination of frustration and motivation. If they thought they could bully me out of my rights, they were mistaken. I had records that demonstrated how I contributed to our shared existence, such as electricity bills, groceries, and half mortgage payments. My attorney and I went over every element of the prenup. He highlighted a significant clause stating that any pecuniary windfalls, including but not limited to lottery or game show winners, are deemed marital assets unless expressly stated differently. It was as if my in-laws had accidentally left a back door open. A week before the hearing, we held a preliminary status conference. My wife arrived with her parents and a team of lawyers, 4 attorneys and a financial advisor. They looked at me with the same air of superiority, but their attitude softened when my lawyer quietly showed the prenuptial agreement, emphasizing the specific clause about lottery money. The judge listened attentively, appeared unimpressed by their attempts to dismiss the case, and ordered that all substantial assets be frozen until the main hearing. That same day, my mother-in-law cornered me outside the courthouse, insisting we speak like adults. She tried to provide a flat payment that was much lower than before, calling it generous for someone of my background. I refused again, telling her that we'd let the judge decide. She snapped that I was destroying the family, as if I had surprised her daughter with a divorce. The hypocrisy made my blood boil, but I remained calm. My lawyer had told me not to engage in heated confrontations that could be used against me later. Behind the scenes, I was terrified that my in-laws might try to hide the lottery earnings in hidden accounts. My lawyer, anticipating this possibility, filed court orders to block any substantial transfers. We also planned to have a forensic accountant ready in case we suspected them of hiding monies. My father-in-law's temper flared. He left me a voicemail calling me filthy and accusing me of taking the love from his daughter's life. It was lavish, given that they were the ones who kicked me out immediately after winning the lottery. As the hearing neared, I meticulously planned with my counsel. We practiced my statement to ensure I seemed calm and factual in court. I had papers of the prenup, receipts for the partially paid mortgage, and even texts from my wife confirming our joint bills. The lawyer advised me to make my replies succinct, but the evidence will speak for itself. If they attempted emotional theatrics, we would respond with precise documentation. On the morning of the hearing, I stood in front of the courthouse, my heart racing. My parents attended me for moral support, but they remained outside the courtroom. When the proceedings began, I noticed my wife seated near her father, both sporting stone-cold looks. Her mother lingered in the back, arms folded. My father-in-law's lawyers, dressed in glossy suits, were confident, maybe hoping that money and legal strength could overcome the facts. The judge, a severe woman in her 50s, didn't waste time. She invited each side to submit their arguments. My wife's main attorney attempted to portray me as a small contributor who had done little more than share the same living environment. They claimed the lottery purchase was a personal transaction made using her money. But my lawyer calmly reminded me that the prenup specifically includes such windfalls as marital property. We also have bank records indicating she had used our joint account card that day. When we presented the information, I noticed visible tension in my father-in-law's camp. The judge inquired whether they had any more paperwork indicating it was her personal money. They fumbled, claiming that the card had been used unintentionally or that it was her father's deposit into the account. But the statements clearly identified our names, not just hers. The judge took note, her attention going to them with anticipation. Eventually, my wife spoke. She said she never intended to upset me, and that her parents pushed for a divorce once the prize was won to protect family assets. She fumbled over her words, acknowledging she was under pressure but also attempting to excuse it by claiming that if anyone found out about the money, they would come after us. My lawyer inquired whether she consulted me before making these judgments. She admitted number. The judge's disdain was evident. By midday, it was evident that their prenuptial agreement was a double-edged sword. The exact document they'd used to isolate their money now threatened to put a large sum of lottery prizes in my hands. The court ordered a second hearing for final judgments, noting that she preferred to approach the lottery as a significant marital asset subject to equitable division. Outside, my father-in-law went by me, mumbling, "This is far from over," but his confidence was clearly shaken. Their desperation grew in the weeks before the ultimate verdict. My father-in-law's lawyers tried everything, submitting motions to revise the prenuptial agreement's terms, arguing the goal was not to include lottery winnings. The judge dismissed the motions, citing the plain text. My mother-in-law tried to corner me again, warning me that if I hurt their family, I would regret it. I told her straight up that they'd started this by pushing me out and surprising me with a divorce. My wife attempted to contact me, leaving an emotional voicemail expressing her desire for things to end amicably. She offered that if we just had a secret agreement, we might be able to recover some of our relationship. I would have considered it if they had treated me fairly from the beginning, but after the intimidation, falsehoods, and forced removal, my trust had evaporated. My lawyer warned me not to engage in these back-channel discussions. We had a strong legal position and no reason to settle for crumbs. Finally, the day for the final hearing arrived. The courtroom was filled with attorneys from both sides. My father, mother, and a few friends arrived to support me, sitting silently at the back. The judge took the bench, reviewed the amended documents, and approved final remarks. My father-in-law's lead lawyer took one final shot, portraying me as a crafty opportunist who uncovered the prenup's loophole after benefiting from the family's generosity. My lawyer responded with plain facts. 1. They compelled me to sign the prenuptial agreement. 2. It specifically mentioned the lottery or other windfall as shared property. 3. My father-in-law financed a portion of our condo, but I contributed monthly, so it was not a completely independent asset. Furthermore, the quick divorce petition following the prize was typical evidence of their plan to keep me from the rewards. The judge listened intently and then issued her decision. She stated that the lottery wins definitely fell under marital assets under the prenup's terms. She chastised my in-laws for attempting to pervert the agreement they had drafted. She also determined that my wife's abrupt expulsion of me from the condo was unfair, and that I was entitled to repayment for my share of the mortgage and marital contributions. In brief, the judge issued an order stating that I would receive a significant portion of the lottery winnings, as well as compensation for my condo part. We parted ways, with a finalization date set for a few weeks later just to complete papers. My father-in-law's expression was thunderous, and my mother-in-law was incensed, whispering fiercely to him. My wife stood there with tears in her eyes, either from genuine remorse or fury over the loss of so much money. I felt both vindication and grief. We used to love one another, but greed, parental influence, and their attempts to exploit me destroyed everything. In the aftermath, their lawyers attempted to provide a slightly changed settlement, most likely expecting I'd accept a lower figure to avoid more complications. My lawyer urged that we accept the judge's decision as is. We had no reason to cut it. The only concession I made was to give up any stake in the condominium. I never wanted to step foot in that place again. They cut me a check for an amazing amount. Was that half the jackpot? Not quite, but it was large enough to allow me to reconstruct my life comfortably. Throughout it all, I concluded that my in-laws, in their hubris, assumed that wealth would protect them from consequences. They did not expect me to fight back effectively. Ironically, the prenuptial agreement they insisted on became the tool that secured my part of the winnings. If there was ever poetic justice, this was it. My wife, as far as I know, is still under her parents' care. She's lost face in her social circle as a result of the chaos that ensued. Some common acquaintances have informed me she is grappling with guilt, but I doubt she would ever openly recognize her family's role in planning this. As a token of appreciation for their support, I used a portion of the settlement to assist my parents in upgrading their home. Another chunk was invested, and while the entire experience left me scarred, changing my perspective on trust, marriage, and money, I find comfort in knowing I remained firm. I refused to be bullied into taking table scraps. Although it was brutally painful, the end result felt like a victory over oppression. Now, free of my in-laws' deceptive grip, I'm moving on. I've returned to a simpler existence, which is oddly reminiscent of my pre-marriage days, but I'm stronger, wiser, and far from the naive man they thought they could steamroll. If they remember anything about me, it should be that they unintentionally provided me with the legal tool I needed to avoid going bankrupt. They launched the war, I completed it, and that concludes this chapter. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.